The silence that followed humanity's departure was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For the first time in recorded history, there were no human observers watching from the shadows. No hidden manipulations guiding the course of events. No secret experiments shaping the development of civilizations. Fleet Admiral Kex Terran stood on his bridge, staring at the empty space where the human fleet had vanished. Around him, his crew worked frantically to process the flood of information coming in from across the galaxy. Every species was trying to understand what the revelation meant for their future. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from all major civilizations. They're requesting immediate conferences. Put them through." The main screen filled with representatives from dozens of species. The ethereal consortium appeared as beings of pure energy. The silicon hegemony looked like walking mountains of crystal and metal. The hive swarm spoke through millions of small creatures that moved as one mind. All of them looked terrified. "The humans are gone," announced Prime Speaker Vorthala of the ethereal consortium. "Our long-range sensors confirm it. Their ships have left our galaxy entirely." "But for how long?" asked Central Node 7743 of the Silicon Hegemony. "Our analysis suggests they could return at any time," Queen Mind Zelithara of the Hive Swarms spoke in her layered voice. "The question is not when they will return. The question is whether they ever truly left. How do we know this isn't another experiment?" Kex Terran understood their fear. For centuries, every major decision had been influenced by human manipulation. Now they were alone, truly alone, for the first time in their civilization's histories. "We need to focus on what we know," he said. "The humans took their most advanced technologies with them. They collected key researchers from our worlds, but they left behind most of our infrastructure and knowledge." "Infrastructure they designed," pointed out Commander Vrexkol of the Border Alliance. "Knowledge they guided us to discover. How do we know any of it is real?" It was a good question. In the days following humanity's departure, scientists across the galaxy were discovering that many of their most fundamental technologies contained elements they couldn't fully explain. Principles that worked perfectly, but were based on theories that didn't quite make sense. "Sir," Kex Terran's science officer called out, "we've completed our analysis of the human weapon signatures. The technology is beyond our understanding, but we found something interesting." "What is it?" "The energy patterns suggest the weapons were designed to be non-lethal to specific genetic markers. The humans could have destroyed our entire fleet, instantly, but their weapons were programmed to leave survivors." Kex Terran thought about this. Even in their final demonstration of power, the humans had been conducting research. They wanted to see how different species would react to overwhelming force. "They were still studying us," he said quietly, "even at the end." Reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy. Human research stations were being discovered everywhere, hidden in places no one had thought to look. Some were ancient, others appeared to be recently abandoned, from the Outer Rim territories. "We found a human observation post built inside a supposedly dead star. It's been recording everything in this sector for over 1,000 years. From the galactic core, there's a human facility orbiting the central black hole. It appears to be studying the fundamental structure of space and time. From unexplored regions, we're detecting the remains of massive human construction projects. They were building something enormous out here, but they took it with them when they left." Each discovery reinforced the same terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just been watching galactic civilization, they had been everywhere studying everything for far longer than anyone had imagined. "What I don't understand," said Speaker Vorthala, "is why they revealed themselves at all. They could have continued their experiment without us knowing." Kex Terran had been wondering the same thing. "I think it was because the experiment was complete. They had learned everything they needed to learn from observing us in our natural state." "Natural state?" laughed Central Node 7743 bitterly. "Nothing about our development was natural. Every major breakthrough, every important war, every technological advance, it was all guided by them. Which means we need to decide what comes next," said Queen Mind Zelithara. "Do we try to continue following the paths they set for us? Do we try to develop independently? Do we work together or compete against each other?" It was the most important question facing galactic civilization. For centuries, human manipulation had prevented any species from becoming too powerful. They had maintained a careful balance that allowed multiple civilizations to coexist. With that guidance gone, anything could happen. "There's something else to consider," Kextaran said. The humans said they were leaving to study other galaxies, but they also warned us about what would happen if we tried to follow them. You think they left monitoring systems behind? I think they want to see what we do without their guidance. This might be the next phase of their experiment. The thought was chilling. Even gone, humanity might still be watching, testing whether galactic civilization could survive and develop on its own. Over the following months, the galaxy began to change. Some species tried to work together, forming new alliances to fill the power vacuum left by human departure. Others competed aggressively for control of abandoned human technologies. The Machine Collective suffered a massive crisis when they discovered the extent of human programming in their systems. Some nodes shut down entirely. Others tried to purge all human influence from their code. A few embraced their artificial nature and began developing in entirely new directions. The ethereal consortium split into factions. Some believed they should try to follow human technological development. Others wanted to abandon technology entirely and focus on pure mental evolution. The HFY hegemony faced its own internal struggles. Many questioned whether their entire civilization was built on a foundation of lies. Some worlds declared independence. Others tried to expand aggressively to fill the power vacuum. But something interesting began to happen. Without human manipulation maintaining artificial balance, species that had been held back began to flourish. Technologies that had been subtly suppressed started advancing rapidly. New forms of cooperation emerged that had never been possible, under human control. Kextaran received a report that made him think about humanity's final message. A joint research project between former enemies had developed faster than light communication technology, the same technology the humans had prevented the Keth Mori from completing centuries earlier. Sir, his science officer said, with this new communication system, we could coordinate activities across the entire galaxy instantly. We could build the kind of unified civilization that humans never allowed. Kextaran nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, humanity was conducting experiments on scales that defied imagination, and they had warned that any species developing the capability to leave their home galaxy would find humans waiting for them. Continue the research, he ordered, but proceed carefully. We need to assume that everything we do is still being observed. By who, sir? Kextaran looked out at the stars, wondering how many of them hosted human observation posts that had never been discovered. By our teachers, he said quietly. The species that spent thousands of years teaching us lessons we never knew we were learning. Years passed. The galaxy slowly adapted to life without human guidance. Some civilizations thrived, others collapsed. New technologies emerged. Old alliances crumbled and reformed in different configurations. And through it all, the question remained. Were humans really gone? Or were they still out there watching their former test subjects struggle to find their own way in the universe? The answer came when the first expedition tried to leave the galaxy. As their ship reached the galactic edge, it encountered something impossible. A structure that spanned millions of light years, invisible to all previous detection methods. And at the center of that structure was a message, written in every language known to galactic civilization. Congratulations on reaching the edge of your local experiment zone. You have demonstrated the capability for independent technological development. Please proceed to the attached coordinates for Evil Ambassador Zethkri sat in his comfortable chair, reading through the thick pile of papers on his desk. The documents were from a species called humans who wanted to join the Galactic Confederation. He had been doing this job for over 200 years, and he had seen many species apply for membership. Most of them were not ready. The humans seemed different, though. Their application was perfect. Every form was filled out correctly. Every signature was in the right place. Their government structure looked organized and fair. They had laws that protected their people. They even had something they called a prime directive that stopped them from bothering other civilizations without permission. Zethkri's assistant walked into the office carrying another uation and possible advancement to the next level of study. The message was signed simply, the researchers. Humanity hadn't left at all. They had simply moved to a larger laboratory. 3 months after humanity joined the Confederation, an emergency message arrived at the central headquarters on Galactic Prime. The message came from Kithara, a peaceful farming world on the edge of known space. Zethkri was working late in his office when his assistant rushed in with the urgent communication. Sir, we have received a distress call from the Kithara system, she said, her forearms shaking with worry. What is their situation? Zethkri asked, setting down his evening meal. The Sectar Empire has blockaded their entire system, sir. They are demanding that Kythera surrender and become a slave world. The Kythera have refused, but their ships are no match for Sectar warships. Zethkri's face darkened. The Sectar Empire was one of the most brutal civilizations in the galaxy. They specialized in conquering weaker worlds and forcing the populations to work as slaves. The Confederation had been trying to stop them for decades, but the Sectar were clever about staying just within the boundaries of galactic law. How long can Kythera hold out, he asked. Without supplies getting through the blockade, the population will begin starving within 2 weeks, his assistant replied. They have 17 million people on that world, sir. Most of them are farmers and their families. Call an emergency session of the council, Zethkri ordered. We need to address this situation immediately. The council chamber filled quickly as representatives from all 12 member species arrived. The Kythera ambassador, a tall being with gray skin and large eyes, stood at the center of the room. His species had joined the Confederation only 5 years ago, seeking protection from exactly this kind of situation. Honorable council members, the Kythera ambassador said, his voice shaking with emotion. My people are trapped. The Sectar have surrounded our world with their warships. No food ships can get through. No medical supplies can reach us. Our children are already getting hungry. Ambassador Zethkri called for order. The council recognizes the severity of this situation. However, we must follow proper procedures when dealing with aggressive species like the Sectar. The Vorthon representative, an insect-like being, clicked his mandibles. According to Confederation Protocol 847B, we must first file formal complaints with the Sectar government. This process requires a minimum of 47 standard days for them to respond. Then we must convene Subcommittee 12 to draft appropriate economic sanctions, added the crystalline delegate. This will require careful study of Sectar trade relationships and economic vulnerabilities. The Altarian council member nodded, in agreement. Once sanctions are approved, we can schedule mediation talks with neutral party oversight. I estimate this process will take approximately 8 months to complete. The Kythera ambassador stepped forward desperately. 8 months? Honored council members, my people will be dead in 2 weeks. Please, we need help now. We understand your concern, Zethkri replied in a calm voice. But civilized species must follow established procedures. We cannot simply attack the Sectar without going through proper channels. That would make us no better than common pirates. Around the chamber, other council members murmured agreement. The procedures existed for good reasons. They prevented wars from starting over misunderstandings. They gave all parties time to find peaceful solutions. They maintained order in the galaxy. But surely there must be something we can do immediately, the Kythera ambassador pleaded. Even sending food ships with escort vessels would help. The Draconian representative shook his large head. Impossible. Any military escort would be considered an act of aggression by the Sectar. We would be violating 17 different treaties and protocols. Throughout this discussion, Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming of Earth sat quietly in her seat. She had been taking notes on her electronic pad, but she had not spoken. Her face showed no emotion, but her dark eyes watched everything carefully. What is humanity's position on this matter? Zethkri asked, noticing her silence. Chen stood up slowly. She was much smaller than most of the other representatives, but her presence filled the room. Ambassador Zethkri, I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. The Kythera are member world of the Confederation, correct? Yes, that is correct. And the Sectar Empire is not a member of the Confederation? No, they have refused all invitations to join. They prefer to operate outside our jurisdiction. Chen nodded once. And how long did you say it would be before Kythera civilians start dying of starvation? The Kythera ambassador answered quickly. 14 days at most, honored representative. Maybe less for the very young and very old. Chen looked around the chamber at all the assembled diplomats. And the council's response is to begin an 8-month process of filing complaints and scheduling meetings. It is the proper procedure, Zethkri replied firmly. We are a civilized organization. We follow rules and laws. We do not act impulsively like savages. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Everyone in the chamber watched her, waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke in a clear, calm voice. How long exactly do you estimate before the first Kythera children start dying of hunger? The medical officer from the Kythera delegation stepped forward. The very youngest will begin suffering malnutrition effects within 10 days. Deaths will likely begin around day 12 or 13. Thank you for that information, Chen said. She gathered her papers and put them in her briefcase. Humanity abstains from this vote. Zethkri was surprised. Abstains? Don't you have an opinion on how to proceed? Oh, we have many opinions, Chen replied with a slight smile. But it seems the Council has already decided on its course of action. Humanity will not interfere with the Confederation's established procedures. So you agree with following proper protocols? The Vorthan representative asked. We always follow proper protocols, Chen answered. The question is which protocols take priority in any given situation. She walked toward the exit, then stopped and turned back to the chamber. I do have one question, though. When the Sectar Empire established this blockade, did they file proper paperwork with the Confederation first? Did they go through Subcommittee 12? Did they schedule mediation talks? The chamber was silent. Everyone knew the answer. The Sectar had simply moved their fleets into position and started threatening to destroy any ship that tried to reach Cathara. I thought so, Chen said, quietly. It's interesting how only some species are expected to follow proper procedures. She left the chamber and the council continued their debate. They voted to begin the formal complaint process. They scheduled committee meetings. They assigned subgroups to study various aspects of the problem. All of these activities would take many months to complete. The Cathara would be long dead before any help arrived through official channels. But Ambassador Chen had not said that humanity would do nothing. She had only said they would not interfere with the Confederation's procedures. These were two very different things, and the difference would become clear very soon. As Chen walked back to the human embassy, she activated her personal communicator. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Chen. Authorization code 77 Alpha. Execute Operation Good Neighbor immediately. On the other end of the communication, Admiral Sarah Chen's voice was crisp and professional. Understood, Ambassador. Operation Good Neighbor is authorized. How do you want us to handle the paperwork? What, paperwork? Ambassador Chen replied with a small smile. We're not doing anything that requires paperwork. 3 days after the council meeting, Zethkri was enjoying his morning meal when emergency alarms started blaring throughout the Confederation headquarters. His assistant rushed into his office, all 4 of her arms waving frantically. Sir, we are receiving multiple priority communications from across the galaxy. What kind of communications? Zethkri asked, setting down his cup. Emergency reports, sir. From 17 different star systems, all involving the Sectar Empire. Zethkri's stomach dropped. What has happened to the Sectar? His assistant activated the main display screen on his office wall. Multiple news feeds and military reports appeared, all showing similar scenes of destruction and confusion. The Sectar blockade fleet around Cathara has been completely destroyed, sir. All 47 warships. There are no survivors. Destroyed? By whom? Did the Confederation finally approve military action? No, sir, that's just the beginning. In the same time period, 17 different Sectar slave camps have been liberated. The slaves have been freed, and the Sectar guards have fled. Also, the main Sectar naval base at Omega Centauri has suffered what appears to be a massive engine failure that destroyed their entire reserve fleet. Zethkri stared at the reports in shock. The Sectar Empire had been a major threat for over 2 centuries. Their military was considered one of the strongest in the galaxy. The idea that someone could destroy so much of their fleet in just 3 days was impossible to believe. Who could have done this? Do we have any witnesses? Any recordings of the attacks? That's the strange part, sir. There are recordings, but they don't show any attacks. According to all the evidence, these were accidents. Accidents? His assistant activated another screen. Look at this recording from the Cathara blockade. It shows human merchant vessels approaching the Sectar fleet. The merchant ships are clearly marked and broadcasting proper identification codes. Zethkri watched the recording. 3 large human cargo ships approached the Sectar blockade fleet. The ships look normal, carrying standard identification and following proper space traffic protocols. The human ships request permission to deliver food supplies to Cathara, his assistant continued. The Sectar commander refuses and orders them to leave. The human captain acknowledges the order and begins to turn away. On the screen, the human ships started to change course. But as they turned, something went wrong with the Sectar vessels. Their shields began fluctuating wildly. Their weapon systems started firing randomly. Their engines began overheating. Watch what happens next, his assistant said. The sectar ships seemed to lose control completely. They crashed into each other, exploded from internal system failures, and generally destroyed themselves while the human merchant vessels watched from a safe distance. The human ships immediately offered rescue assistance, his assistant explained. But unfortunately, there were no survivors. The human captains filed proper incident reports expressing their regret over the tragic accidents. Zeth Kree watched the recording 3 more times. Technically, the humans had done nothing wrong. They had requested permission to deliver supplies. When refused, they had begun to leave. The sectar fleet had simply suffered a series of catastrophic system failures, but the timing was very suspicious. "Show me the reports from the slave camps," he ordered. More recordings appeared on screen. Human archaeological survey teams had been studying ancient ruins near several sectar slave camps. The teams were properly licensed and had filed all necessary research permits. They were doing nothing illegal. But somehow, while these human teams were working nearby, the slave camps suffered massive equipment failures. Guard towers collapsed due to structural fatigue. Security systems shut down because of electromagnetic interference. Transport ships crashed due to navigation errors. In the confusion, thousands of slaves had escaped. The human survey teams had offered humanitarian assistance to the fleeing refugees, providing food, medical care, and transportation to safe worlds. And the naval base destruction? Zeth Kree asked. A human scientific vessel was conducting stellar research in the area, his assistant explained. They were studying gravitational anomalies near the Omega Centauri system. Perfectly legal research with proper permits. The recording showed a single human research ship, much smaller than the massive sectar naval base. The humans were conducting scans and taking measurements when the base's main fusion reactor began experiencing unexpected resonance fluctuations. The reactor exploded, taking out not only the base but also the entire reserve fleet that was docked there. The human research ship immediately offered assistance, but again, there were no survivors. "Get me Ambassador Chen on the communicator immediately," Zeth Kree ordered. A few minutes later, Ambassador Chen's face appeared on the screen. She was sitting calmly in her office, sipping tea and reading reports. She looked completely relaxed and innocent. "Good morning, Ambassador Zeth Kree," she said with a pleasant smile. "How can I help you today?" "Ambassador Chen, I need to ask you some questions about recent events involving the Sectar Empire." "Of course. I heard about those tragic accidents. Such a shame when equipment fails so catastrophically. Our merchant captains and research teams have filed all proper incident reports naturally." "Ambassador, did humanity just attack the Sectar Empire?" Chen looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Attack? Oh no, Ambassador. That would be completely against Confederation law. Humanity would never launch unprovoked attacks against another species. We are committed to following proper procedures and getting authorization for any military actions. But all these accidents happened right after the council meeting about Cathara. Accidents do tend to cluster together sometimes," Chen replied, taking another sip of her tea. "It's quite unfortunate for the Sectar, really. They've had terrible luck with equipment failures lately." "Ambassador, the timing of these events is very suspicious. I suppose it might seem that way to someone looking for patterns," Chen admitted. "But correlation is not causation, as our scientists like to say. Just because events happen at the same time doesn't mean they're related." Zeth Kree felt his frustration growing. "But what about the Confederation protocols we discussed? You were supposed to wait for the committee process to complete." "And we did wait," Chen replied with perfect calm. "The Confederation committee is still meeting, isn't it? They're still following proper procedures to address the Cathara situation. Humanity has not interfered with that process in any way. But you abstained from the vote." "Yes, we abstained from your vote to begin an 8-month bureaucratic process. That's completely different from taking action ourselves. We never agreed to abide by your timeline, Ambassador. We only agreed not to interfere with your procedures." Zeth Kree stared at her through the screen. "So you're saying humanity had nothing to do with these sectar accidents?" Chen's expression became very serious. "Ambassador Zeth Kree, I want to be absolutely clear about this. Humanity has not violated a single Confederation law or treaty. We have not attacked any member species. We have not interfered with the committee's procedures. All of our vessels were engaged in completely legal activities with proper documentation. But the results. The results are that the Cathara blockade no longer exists. 17 worlds full of slaves have been liberated, and the Sectar military threat has been significantly reduced. I would think the Confederation would be pleased with these outcomes, even if you achieved them by breaking the rules. Chen tilted her head slightly, looking confused. Which rules did we break? Can you name a specific law or treaty that humanity violated? Sethkri opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Technically, the humans had followed all proper procedures. Their ships had proper identification. Their research permits were valid. Their merchant licenses were current. They had filed all required reports after the incidents. Ambassador Chen, he said finally, did the humans ask the sectar for permission before these accidents occurred? Chen smiled brightly. Ambassador, why would we need to ask the sectar for permission to conduct legal research and merchant activities in open space? Did the sectar ask anyone's permission before they started blockading Kithara? The communication ended, leaving Sethkri staring at a blank screen. Somehow humanity had completely destroyed the sectar threat, without technically breaking any rules or violating any procedures. But they had definitely not asked anyone for consent. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council was the largest in over 50 years. Representatives from all member worlds had arrived, along with observers from dozens of non-member species. The great chamber buzzed with excited conversations in 100 different languages. Sethkri stood at the center podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. Some looked angry, others seemed confused. A few appeared secretly pleased. The humans sat in their assigned section, looking completely calm and innocent. This council has been called to address recent events involving humanity and the Sectar Empire, Sethkri announced. In the past week, the Sectar have suffered what they claim are coordinated attacks across 17 star systems. The Vorthon representative clicked his mandibles loudly. These were not mere attacks. The humans destroyed an entire battle fleet. They liberated slave camps. They crippled the Sectar war machine. And they did it without asking permission from anyone, added the crystalline delegate, her crystal body flashing angry red colors. From the human section, Ambassador Chen raised her hand politely. May I address the council's concerns? Several delegates shouted objections, but Sethkri called for order. The council recognizes Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming of Earth. Chen stood and walked to the center of the chamber. She moved slowly and confidently, showing no signs of nervousness despite the hostile atmosphere. Honorable council members, she began. I understand there is confusion about recent events. Let me clarify humanity's position. We have not attacked anyone. We have not violated any Confederation laws. All human activities have been conducted with proper documentation and legal authority. The draconian representative roared in anger. Legal authority? Who gave you authority to destroy the Sectar fleet? The same authority that gave the Sectar permission to blockade Kithara, Chen replied calmly. Which is to say, no one. That's different, the Altarian delegate protested with all forearms waving. The Sectar are not Confederation members. They don't have to follow our rules. Exactly, Chen agreed. And neither do we, when dealing with non-member species who are threatening member worlds. Sethkri felt his head beginning to ache. Ambassador Chen, your species applied for membership based on your respect for proper procedures. You specifically mentioned your Prime Directive about not interfering without consent. That's correct, and we have followed our Prime Directive perfectly. How can you say that? You interfered with the Sectar situation without getting anyone's consent. Chen looked genuinely puzzled. Whose consent should we have obtained? The Kai Sectar who were committing acts of aggression against a Confederation member world? Should we have asked the slaves in the camps if they minded being liberated? The Kithara ambassador stood up from the observer section. If I may speak, he said quietly. The chamber fell silent to hear him. The human ships arrived in our system just as our children were beginning to starve. They brought food, medicine, and hope. They saved 17 million lives. The Kithara people are forever grateful to humanity for their swift action. Several other observers nodded in agreement. Representatives from recently liberated worlds looked at the humans with obvious admiration. But the Confederation Council members were not pleased. The issue is not whether the results were good, Sethkri explained. The issue is that humanity acted without authorization from proper authorities. Chen tilted her head. Which proper authorities? The council was still in committee meetings. The Kithara were dying while you debated procedures. Should we have waited for your 8-month process to complete while people starved? Yes, the Vorthon representative clicked angrily. That is exactly what civilized species do. We follow proper channels. We respect authority. But whose authority? Chen asked. You keep saying we should have asked for consent, but you won't say who we should have asked. The Confederation Council? You already said you would take 8 months to make a decision. The Sectar Empire? They were the ones committing the aggressive acts. She walked around the chamber, looking at each delegate as she spoke. Let me ask you all a question. When your own homes are threatened, do you call a committee meeting? When your children are in danger, do you file proper paperwork? When someone is attacking your family, do you ask the attacker for permission to defend yourself? That's not the same thing. The crystalline delegate flashed bright red. These were not our homes or our children. They were Cathara homes and children, Chen replied firmly. And Cathara is a Confederation member. If Confederation membership means anything, it means we protect each other. The draconian representative rose to his full height. You humans think you know better than civilizations that have existed for thousands of years? No, Chen said quietly. We think we know the difference between right and wrong, and we think that difference is more important than following procedures that allow evil to continue. Zethkri called for order as angry shouts erupted around the chamber. When the noise died down, he addressed Chen directly. Ambassador, your actions have disrupted the careful balance of power in this galaxy. The Sectar Empire existed for over 2 centuries. Many species feared them, but they also helped maintain stability through that fear. Chen stared at him for a long moment. Ambassador Zethkri, are you seriously arguing that slavery and genocide are acceptable prices to pay for stability? I'm arguing that sudden changes cause chaos. The Sectar collapse has left a power vacuum. Other aggressive species might try to fill it. Then we'll deal with those species too, Chen said simply. The chamber erupted in chaos again. Some delegates shouted in outrage. Others seemed shocked by her casual dismissal of their concerns. You can't just solve every problem with violence, the Altarian delegate protested. We're not using violence, Chen replied. We're using creative problem solving. There's a difference. Creative problem solving? Zethkri repeated. You destroyed an entire battle fleet. The Sectar fleet destroyed itself through equipment failures. We simply happened to be nearby when it occurred. Multiple times. In 17 different locations. What are the odds of that happening? Chen smiled innocently. Probably about the same odds as the Confederation taking meaningful action to stop genocide within the next 8 months. The human delegation left the chamber as arguments continued around them. No formal vote was taken, but it was clear the council was divided. Some species were outraged by humanity's actions. Others were quietly grateful. Later that evening, Zethkri stood in his office looking out at the stars. His assistant approached carefully. Sir, we've received reports of 3 more incidents involving human vessels and criminal organizations. What kind of incidents? The pirate fleet that was raiding trade routes near the Centauri system has apparently decided to become legitimate merchants. The warlord who was threatening to invade the peaceful worlds has withdrawn his forces, and the slave traders operating near the rim have all suffered simultaneous navigation failures. Zethkri sighed deeply. Let me guess. Human ships were conducting routine business in all those areas. Yes, sir, all with proper documentation. And I suppose there were no witnesses to any actual wrongdoing. No, sir. Just a lot of very convenient accidents and sudden changes of heart. Zethkri continued staring at the stars. The humans had been members of the Confederation for only a few months, but they were already changing everything. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't follow proper procedures, they just acted when they thought something was wrong. And somehow the galaxy was becoming a better place because of it. Sir, his assistant said quietly, what are we going to do about the humans? Zethkri was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. I honestly don't know. 6 months had passed since the Sectar incidents, and Zethkri found himself reading reports that seemed impossible to believe. He sat in his office with stacks of data files covering his entire desk. The latest crime statistics, sir, his assistant said, placing another file on the already overflowing surface. Zethkri opened the report and stared at the numbers. These can't be correct. I checked them 3 times, sir. Interstellar piracy is down 67%. Armed conflicts between star systems have decreased by 89%. Slave trading has dropped by 94%. And what about Confederation response times for humanitarian crises? His assistant's forearms drooped with embarrassment. Still 8 to 14 months, sir. We've actually gotten slower because we keep forming additional subcommittees to study the human situation. Zethkri leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. The Confederation had spent more time in emergency meetings during the past 6 months than in the previous 5 years combined. And all because of humanity. "Show me the latest incident reports," he ordered. The wall screen lit up with a map of the galaxy. Dozens of small red dots marked locations where accidents had occurred near human vessels. Each dot represented some criminal organization that had either been destroyed, disbanded, or mysteriously decided to reform their ways. "The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore," his assistant said. "Wherever human ships conduct their normal business activities, criminal operations seem to experience terrible luck. What does Ambassador Chen say when we question her about these incidents?" "The same thing she always says, sir. That humanity is committed to following all proper laws and procedures. She expresses regret about the unfortunate accidents that keep happening around human vessels. She offers to provide any documentation we need to verify that her people were engaged in completely legal activities." Zethkri nodded grimly. The human documentation was always perfect. Every permit was valid, every license was current. Every activity was technically legal under Confederation law, but the results spoke for themselves. "Sir," his assistant said hesitantly, "I've been analyzing the data from worlds that humans have helped. Would you like to see the economic reports?" "Show me." New graphs appeared on the screen. Trade volume is up 134% in systems where humans have been active. Agricultural production has increased. Manufacturing output has grown. Even tourism is booming. Tourism? Yes, sir. Many species want to visit worlds that have been touched by human luck, as they're calling it. Some are even requesting human merchant vessels to visit their systems, hoping for beneficial accidents to happen to their local criminal problems. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Zethkri's assistant activated the communication system. "Priority message from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition," she announced. A familiar face appeared on screen. Ambassador Yeltar from the coalition of pacifist worlds that had joined the Confederation specifically to avoid military conflicts. "Ambassador Zethkri," Yeltar said in his usual calm voice, "the Peaceful Worlds Coalition wishes to make a formal request." "What can the Confederation do for you?" "We would like to request that human merchant vessels be given priority routing through our space. We have noticed that systems regularly visited by humans experience significantly fewer problems with raiders and aggressive neighbors." Zethkri stared at the screen. "Ambassador Yeltar, are you asking us to use humans as unofficial security?" "Oh no, nothing so crude. We're simply requesting that normal human business activities be encouraged in our region. Whatever coincidental benefits that might bring are just fortunate side effects." After the communication ended, Zethkri stood and walked to his window. Below him, the great city of Galactic Prime bustled with activity. Representatives from hundreds of worlds conducted official business in the proper organized way that had maintained peace for centuries. But that peace had been built on accepting certain levels of crime, corruption, and oppression as unavoidable facts of life. The Confederation's careful procedures ensured that no hasty decisions were made, even when those careful procedures allowed terrible things to continue happening while committees debated. His assistant approached with yet another report. "Sir, I have the final analysis you requested on humanity's membership status. What did you conclude?" "Technically, humanity has not violated any Confederation laws or treaties. All their activities have been documented and legal. They have followed proper procedures for everything they do officially." "And unofficially?" "Unofficially, they seem to have decided that some things are more important than asking for permission." Zethkri took the report and sat back down at his desk. The document was thick, filled with detailed analysis of human activities across the galaxy. The conclusion was clear. Humanity was making the galaxy a better place by ignoring half the rules that prevented other species from making the galaxy a better place. "What recommendation should I make to the Council?" he asked. His assistant was quiet for a long moment. "Sir, what if we ask the wrong question?" "What do you mean?" "What if instead of asking whether the humans should be punished for not asking permission, we asked whether our permission was worth asking for in the first place?" Zethkri looked up at her in surprise. In 200 years of diplomatic service, he had never heard his assistant question Confederation procedures. "Explain." "Sir, the humans have prevented more suffering in 6 months than we have prevented in 6 years. They've stopped more crimes than our security forces have stopped in a decade. They've liberated more oppressed peoples than our liberation committees have even identified, but they did it without following proper channels." "Yes, sir, and that's exactly why they succeeded." Zethkri stared at the report in his hands. The statistics were undeniable. The galaxy was becoming safer, freer, and more prosperous everywhere humans operated. Sir, his assistant continued, what if the proper way to do things isn't actually proper? What if our careful procedures just give criminals and tyrants more time to hurt people while we debate whether helping those people might set bad precedents? Soft knock interrupted their conversation. The door opened and a young intern entered carrying an official message pad. Sir, Ambassador Chen sends her regards and asks if you have time to meet with her. She says she has something she thinks you might find interesting. Send her in. A few minutes later, Ambassador Chen entered the office. She looked tired but pleased, like someone who had been working hard on something important. Ambassador Zethkri, thank you for seeing me. I wanted to discuss humanity's official response to the various concerns the Council has raised about our activities. What response is that? Chen placed a document on his desk. Humanity formally requests that the Confederation modify its emergency response procedures to allow for immediate action in cases involving threats to member worlds. Zethkri picked up the document and read through it quickly. You want us to change our entire legal structure? We want you to add a new category of emergency authorization. When member worlds are threatened by non-member aggressors, any Confederation member should be allowed to provide immediate assistance without waiting for committee approval. That could lead to chaos. Species might abuse such authority. Chen smiled. Ambassador, look around. We've been providing immediate assistance for months without authorization. Has it led to chaos? Zethkri looked at the crime statistics on his desk, the economic reports, the testimonials from grateful worlds. No, he admitted. It hasn't. The galaxy doesn't need more committees, Chen said quietly. It needs more people willing to help when help is needed. It needs more species who understand that some things are too important to wait for permission. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Ambassador, we never asked for your consent to help people, but we're asking now if you'd like to help us make helping people easier. After she left, Zethkri sat alone in his office, staring at the human proposal. His assistant watched him carefully. Sir, what are you thinking? Zethkri was quiet for a very long time. Finally, he spoke. I'm thinking that maybe humans don't ask for consent because they've learned something we forgot. What's that, sir? Sometimes the right thing to do is more important than the right way to do things. He picked up his official seal and pressed it onto the human proposal, authorizing it for immediate council consideration. For the first time in his career, Ambassador Zethkri had acted without asking his superiors for permission first. It felt strange. It also felt right.